The sun was high over ABA, and the compound buzzed with excitement. Balloons floated at the gate, chairs were arranged neatly under bright canopies, and music poured from the speakers, making the air feel alive. It was Ngozi's baby shower, and everyone was dressed in their best lace and geli, laughing and clapping as they greeted one another. The smell of jollof rice, fried chicken, and pepper soup filled the air, mixing with the sound of chatter and camera flashes. All eyes turned toward Ngozi, glowing in her maternity gown, sitting like a queen in the decorated chair as friends and relatives praised her. In the middle of it all was Ifeoma, her older sister. She moved quietly from table to table, carrying trays of drinks, bending down politely to serve guests who barely noticed her face. While people hugged Ngozi and showered her with gifts, Ifeoma's presence blended into the background, like she was just another house help. Some of the women even whispered, "Ngozi really brings honor to this family." Ifeoma heard it but kept her smile small, swallowing the ache in her chest. She wore a simple dress, nothing fancy, her hair tied back neatly. Every time she passed by, her mother waved her off with instructions. "Go and bring more bottles. Wipe that table. Move faster." No one asked if she had eaten. No one offered her a chair. Yet she kept moving, steady and quiet, her heart heavy but her spirit refusing to break. It was her sister's day, and she wouldn't let her tears ruin it. The music was still playing, and people were laughing when Madame Ebel, their mother, stood near the center of the compound, her voice louder than anyone else's. She was dressed in her finest wrapper, gold jewelry shining under the sun. She held her glass high and smiled proudly at Ngozi, who sat surrounded by gifts and admirers. "This daughter," she said, pointing at Ngozi, "is the one who brings our family honor. She is the reason people gather here today. She is the true pride of my womb." The guests clapped politely, some nodding in agreement. But then Madame Ebel's tone shifted, sharp and cutting like a knife. She turned slightly, her eyes landing on Ifeoma, who was standing quietly at the edge of the crowd with an empty tray in her hands. "And this one," Madame Ebel said with a bitter laugh, "this one has no future. Nothing good will ever come from her. Only Ngozi makes us proud." For a second, the whole compound went silent. Then a few people forced out nervous laughs, trying to lighten the tension. Some guests looked away, pretending not to hear, while others gave awkward smiles. But the words had already landed. They were heavy, they were cruel, and they echoed louder than the music. Ifeoma froze, her chest tightening as if the air had suddenly disappeared. She felt her hands trembling around the tray, her eyes burning with unshed tears. She wanted to disappear, to run out of the compound and never look back. But she stood there, forcing herself to stay still, because if she broke down, the guests would laugh harder. She swallowed hard, pushing the pain deep inside, pretending her mother's words had not pierced her like arrows. Inside, though, the hurt was unbearable. Memories rushed through her mind. The night she stayed awake studying by candlelight, the morning she went hungry so that her siblings could eat, the sacrifices she made without ever asking for praise. And yet here she was, being mocked like she was nothing, in front of strangers, in front of family, in front of the very people who should have known her worth. Some guests shifted uncomfortably in their chairs, whispering to each other. A few women gave Ifeoma pitying glances, but no one spoke up. The laughter and chatter slowly returned, covering the sting of the moment, but for Ifeoma, time had stopped. Her sister Ngozi avoided her eyes, pretending to focus on the gifts in front of her. Her mother went on smiling proudly, as if nothing cruel had just been said. And Ifeoma, standing quietly with her head slightly bowed, felt smaller than she had ever felt before. She held the tray tighter, blinked away the tears threatening to fall, and whispered to herself in silence, "One day they will see me. One day they will know my worth." The compound grew louder as Ngozi began opening her gifts. Brightly wrapped boxes, glittering baby clothes, and envelopes filled with money were placed before her. Every item brought cheers, laughter, and more praises. Cameras flashed, songs played, and women danced around her chair, showering her with love. In the middle of the noise, Ifeoma slipped quietly to the back of the compound, holding her tray close to her chest as if it could hide her pain. She moved past the rows of chairs, past the smiling faces, until she reached the corner where the music sounded faint and the voices became distant. She sank onto a wooden bench, her shoulders slumping as she let out a shaky breath. For the first time that day, she allowed her face to fall, the weight of humiliation pressing down on her. Her mind drifted back to the nights she had stayed awake under the dim light of a kerosene lamp, scribbling notes and solving problems while others slept peacefully. She remembered the times she worked small jobs, cleaning houses, helping in shops, tutoring children, just to make sure there was enough money for food or school supplies for her siblings. Many times she had skipped meals, hiding her hunger with a smile so her younger ones could eat. And yet no one ever noticed. No one ever said, "Thank you." Instead, whenever she spoke of her dreams, of wanting to study further, of wanting to build something meaningful, her words were brushed aside. "Focus on what is important," her mother would snap. "Your sister is the one who will bring us respect." Those words had become a song she could not escape. Ifeoma closed her eyes and remembered the day she tried to share her joy after being selected to volunteer at a health clinic. She had rushed home, excited to tell her family how she would be helping mothers and children. But her mother barely looked at her, only saying, "You should be in the kitchen." The excitement she carried that day had died quietly inside her, like a flame snuffed out before it could spread. Back in the present, she heard the roar of applause from the front yard as Ngozi lifted a shiny gold baby stroller. The voices echoed like thunder, reminding her again of how invisible she was in her own family. Her heart tightened, but she wiped her eyes quickly, not wanting even the walls to see her tears. She whispered softly to herself, "One day, all this pain will mean something. One day, I will not just serve drinks. I will serve purpose." She sat in silence, letting her breath steady. The humiliation burned deep, but beneath it, a quiet strength stirred. A strength her family had never cared to see, but one the world was yet to discover. The celebration was still in full swing when the sound of tires crunching on gravel cut through the music. A sleek black SUV rolled slowly into the compound, its tinted windows reflecting the bright decorations. The car came to a smooth stop near the gate, and at once, the chatter began to die down. Heads turned. Conversations paused. Even the drummers softened their beats. "Who is that?" someone whispered, craning their neck. Another guest muttered, "That looks like an expensive car. Who could it be?" The back door opened, and a tall man stepped out, dressed smartly in a well-cut suit. His presence carried a weight that needed no introduction, yet people gasped when they recognized him. "Isn't that Dr. Obinna from Enugu?" one woman said in shock, her voice almost trembling. "The famous physician." "Yes, it's him," another guest whispered loudly. "The man who runs the big hospital, the one always on TV." The compound rippled with murmurs, curiosity spreading like fire. What business could such a respected man have at a baby shower in ABA? Guests adjusted their clothes, some standing a little taller, others whispering as they pointed in his direction. Madame Ebel's eyes widened as she quickly smoothed her wrapper and forced a proud smile, as though she had expected him all along. Dr. Obinna walked with calm authority, his steps measured, his expression unreadable. His eyes scanned the crowd, moving past the decorated chairs, the women dancing, and even Ngozi, who sat glowing at the center of attention. It was clear he was not there for the gifts or the food. His presence alone shifted the atmosphere. What had been a casual celebration now felt like an important gathering. Guests whispered to one another, "Did he come for Ngozi? Maybe he's here to bless the baby shower." Some even speculated in hushed tones. Maybe he brought a special gift, something bigger than all these. But inside, people were unsettled. Why would a man of such high standing, a figure known for his work in medicine and public health, appear unannounced at such an event? His name was known across Nigeria for saving lives, for awards, for speaking at conferences. And now here he was in their compound, walking steadily toward the center. Ifeoma, still at the back, froze when she saw him. Her heart skipped. She knew that face, though she had never imagined seeing him here. A mix of fear and hope stirred within her, though she quickly lowered her gaze, afraid of being noticed. By the time Dr. Obinna stopped in the middle of the compound, the music had completely faded. Silence spread like a blanket over the crowd. The only sound was the whispering voices, low and shaky. Why is he here? Who is he looking for? Nobody had the answer. But everyone could feel it. Something was about to change. Dr. Obinna stood tall in the center of the compound, his sharp eyes scanning the crowd. The guests waited, holding their breath, eager to know why such an important man had appeared at what was supposed to be a simple baby shower. He lifted his hand slightly, and the little murmurs died down. The silence grew heavy, everyone's attention fixed on him. Then his voice rang out, calm yet commanding. Where is Iphioma? The name cut through the crowd like lightning. Heads turned instantly. Some guests frowned in confusion. Others whispered, Iphioma? Did he say Iphioma? All eyes searched until they found her, standing shyly near the back, half hidden by the shadows. The tray she had been holding slipped from her hands and clattered softly to the ground. Her breath caught in her throat. She had never been called like this before, not by her family, and certainly not by someone like him. Slowly, almost unwillingly, she stepped forward, every eye burning into her. Her mother stiffened, her face pale with shock. Ngozi's smile froze, the laughter on her lips fading away. Even the drummers lowered their sticks, waiting. When Iphioma reached the center, Dr. Obinna smiled gently, his expression softening. My dear, he said, his voice carrying warmth, I came here for you. The crowd gasped. Madame Ebel's mouth fell open. He continued, his words measured and clear. Your test results confirm what we have been searching for. Your research, your dedication, and your contribution have reached us in Enugu. And today, I am here to announce before your family, your neighbors, and your community, that you are the perfect candidate for the recognition we are preparing. The hospital will honor you with a national award for your research contribution. For a heartbeat, no one moved, no one spoke. It was as though the air itself froze. Then, like a wave crashing, gasps erupted across the compound. What? Iphioma, people whispered. She. National award. Some clapped hands over their mouths in disbelief, others exchanged stunned looks. Iphioma stood trembling, her eyes wide. Tears welled up, not from pain this time, but from the weight of being seen, finally, for who she truly was. All her nights of sacrifice, the hidden hours of work, the times she was mocked and ignored, it all rushed back, but now they carried a new meaning. Her mother's earlier words, this one has no future, still echoed in the air, but now they were drowned out by something louder, the sound of truth, the sound of destiny breaking through. People leaned closer, some even standing on their toes, phones already raised to record. The forgotten daughter, the one who had been treated like a shadow, was suddenly standing in the brightest spotlight of all. Dr. Obinna placed a hand gently on her shoulder and said with pride, Nigeria will know your name, Iphioma. The compound erupted, not with laughter at her expense this time, but with awe. The moment Dr. Obinna's words settled in the air, the compound changed completely. Just minutes ago, laughter, music, and dancing had filled the space. Now, silence stretched across the crowd like a heavy cloth. Every single eye was fixed on Iphioma, the girl who had always been overlooked, the one most people barely noticed. Madame Ebel, who only a short while earlier had mocked her own daughter in front of everyone, stood frozen. Her mouth hung open, her eyes wide, but no sound came out. She clutched the edge of her wrapper as if holding on to something solid would stop her from falling. The pride that had shone in her face for Ngozi was gone, replaced with shock and shame. Her words, "This one has no future," echoed loudly in her head, and now the whole crowd knew how wrong she had been. Ngozi, sitting on her decorated chair, tried to keep smiling, but her lips trembled. The glow she wore like a crown moments ago dimmed instantly. Her gifts, her attention, her spotlight, all of it seemed to fade the moment Iphioma's name was called. She stared at her sister, disbelief flashing in her eyes. It was supposed to be her day, the day everyone celebrated her. Yet, in a single announcement, the attention had shifted. The crowd was no longer looking at the baby shower queen. They were looking at the forgotten sister, who was now being lifted higher than anyone expected. Whispers spread quickly among the guests. "Did you hear that? She's the one making history. So all this time she was working on something big. I can't believe it. "We never knew." Some shook their heads in awe, others in embarrassment, realizing how they too had ignored her. A few women covered their mouths, whispering to their neighbors. And her own mother insulted her just before this. What a shame. The air grew heavy with judgment. People's eyes darted back and forth between Madame Ebel and Iphioma, comparing the cruel words that had been spoken earlier with the honor now being placed before them. The shame was unbearable for the mother who had boasted only of one daughter, while publicly belittling the other. Iphioma stood quietly, still trembling, still unsure if this moment was real. For years she had walked like a shadow in her own home, unnoticed and unappreciated. Now the same family and neighbors who laughed at her were staring in awe. She felt the weight of their eyes but refused to bow her head this time. She stood taller, even as her tears threatened to fall. The music had stopped. The dancing had stopped. Even the children running around earlier now stood still, sensing something important was happening. The entire atmosphere had shifted, like the earth itself had turned, giving light to the one they thought would never shine. In that silence, one truth became clear to everyone present. The daughter they ignored was the one carrying the family's true honor. As the whispers filled the compound, Iphioma's eyes drifted away from the crowd. Her heart pounded, and in that moment, memories came rushing back, memories of a journey no one in her family ever cared to ask about. She remembered the first day she walked into the small community clinic at the edge of ABA. The building was old, the walls faded, but inside were mothers cradling sick children, old women waiting for medicine, and tired nurses trying their best with so little. She had gone there as a volunteer, sweeping floors, cleaning benches, and fetching water. No one paid her, no one thanked her, but she stayed, because her heart told her this was where she belonged. Day after day, she watched how the doctors struggled to care for so many with so little. She began learning quietly, asking questions, writing notes, reading whatever medical books she could borrow. While her family thought she was wasting time, she was actually finding purpose. When others slept, she sat under the dim glow of a lantern, studying, researching, and preparing reports. Sometimes she would stay late at the clinic, helping nurses vaccinate children, or comforting mothers who had lost hope. She remembered one woman who held her baby with tears in her eyes, whispering, "God bless you, my daughter." Those words stayed with Iphioma longer than any praise from her own home. Soon, she caught the attention of visiting researchers who came to the clinic. They were surprised by her dedication, by the detailed notes she kept, by how she could explain the challenges the community faced with clarity and passion. She didn't tell her family about them. She knew they wouldn't understand. Instead, she quietly worked with the researchers, helping collect data, interviewing mothers, and writing reports. From those long nights and hidden sacrifices, a small project was born. Iphioma designed a simple but powerful community health initiative, focused on educating women about child nutrition, hygiene, and preventive care. She used her own little savings to print leaflets and organize small meetings in churches and markets. At first, only a handful of women came, but slowly the numbers grew. Mothers started sharing her lessons with others. The project spread quietly, like seeds carried by the wind. One day her work reached Enugu. Doctors from the General Hospital read about her project through the researchers she had assisted. They were impressed, not just by the idea but by the persistence of the young woman behind it. Without telling anyone, they invited her to contribute her research findings to a national program. She accepted, silently, never mentioning it at home, never expecting recognition. Now, standing in the compound with cameras flashing, the world finally knew what her family had ignored all along. Iphioma's years of hidden service, of silent sacrifice, were no longer invisible. Her secret journey had stepped out of the shadows, and into history. For a moment, the compound was frozen in silence, the weight of Dr. Obina's announcement hanging in the air. Then, slowly at first, a few people began to clap. It was hesitant, unsure, as if they were testing whether the moment was real. But within seconds, the sound grew louder, spreading from one corner of the compound to the other, until it became a thunder of applause. People rose from their plastic chairs, some smiling wide, others shaking their heads in disbelief. The same guests who had barely looked at Iphioma when she served them drinks were now staring at her with admiration. "Well done, my daughter," one elderly man called out. A woman near the front wiped her eyes and said, "God bless you, child." It felt unreal to Iphioma. She stood rooted in place, her body trembling, her heart racing faster than the drums that had once filled the air. She had dreamed of this feeling, of being seen, of being acknowledged, but she had never imagined it would come like this. Tears rolled freely down her cheeks, but they were not the tears of humiliation she had swallowed earlier. These were tears of vindication, of release, of a soul finally recognized after years of silence. Guests began to step forward, one by one, reaching out to shake her hand. Some bowed their heads slightly as they spoke to her. "You have made us proud," a man in a fine Igbata said. "We didn't know you carried such greatness." Another woman held her hand tightly and whispered, "Forgive us, we looked at you but we did not see you." Even the younger guests, who had laughed at Madame Ebel's cruel words earlier, now looked ashamed. Some joined the clapping louder than anyone else, hoping their noise could cover their guilt. A group of children, not fully understanding but sensing the shift, clapped with bright smiles, chanting, "Auntie Iphioma! Auntie Iphioma!" Their innocent voices pierced her heart with warmth she had not felt in years. She looked at her mother, who was still frozen, unable to move or speak. For the first time in her life, Iphioma realized she didn't need her mother's validation. She didn't need Madame Ebel's approval to know her worth. The applause of strangers, the respect of neighbors, and the recognition of the nation were enough to prove that her light had been burning all along. Her vision blurred with tears, but she raised her chin slightly, letting herself stand tall. The noise around her no longer felt overwhelming. It felt like music, music she had been waiting her whole life to hear. As the applause grew louder, Iphioma closed her eyes for a moment and let it wash over her. Every clap, every cheer, every whispered word of respect healed a piece of the wound her family had carved into her. For the first time she felt seen, not as the forgotten daughter, not as the servant in her own home, but as a woman whose name would never be ignored again. The cheers were still echoing when Madame Ebel finally found her voice. She stepped forward slowly, her face pale, her proud shoulders slumped. The same woman who had mocked her daughter earlier now looked shaken, desperate to undo what had already been done. She reached for Iphioma's hand, her voice trembling. "My daughter, I didn't mean it," she muttered quickly, her eyes darting around the crowd. "You know I was only joking. You know how mothers talk sometimes. I didn't mean to hurt you." Her words floated in the air, but they carried no weight. Everyone had heard what she said before. Everyone had seen the way she mocked her own child. Now, her excuses sounded weak, like thin cloth trying to cover a deep wound. Some guests exchanged looks, their faces full of judgment. Others shook their heads quietly, whispering, "Now she regrets it. After all these years." Iphioma stood still, her chest rising and falling as she tried to hold herself together. The tears threatened to spill again, but she refused to let them fall for the same reason as before. This time her tears would not be for pain, they would be for strength. She looked at her mother, her voice soft but firm, every word carrying the weight of years of silence. "You celebrated only those who shined in your eyes," she said slowly, her lips trembling. "But you forgot I was burning quietly, burning with dreams, with sacrifices, with a fire you never cared to see." The crowd went silent again, the truth in her words hitting hard. Some people nodded, others bit their lips, moved by the raw honesty of her voice. Madame Ebel's face crumpled. She opened her mouth as if to speak again, but no words came out. The shame was written clearly across her face, her eyes shining with regret she could not hide. "I carried this family in ways you will never know," Iphioma continued, her voice steadier now. "I gave up my own dreams so others could have theirs. I worked when no one noticed. I prayed when no one believed. And all I ever wanted was for you to see me, to say, 'Well done, my daughter.' But you never did." Her words were like arrows, sharp, piercing, but true. Some of the women in the crowd wiped their eyes, moved to tears by the rawness of the moment. The silence that followed was heavier than any music or laughter that had filled the compound earlier. Madame Ebel finally covered her face with her hands, unable to meet her daughter's gaze. She whispered again, "Forgive me, Iphioma, forgive me," but the words sounded weak, lost in the air. Iphioma blinked away her tears, lifted her head, and said nothing more. She didn't need to. The truth had been spoken. The whole world had heard it, and her mother's regret, heavy and late, could never erase the years of silence. The compound was glowing under the late afternoon sun when Dr. Obinna turned toward Iphioma, holding a cream-colored envelope with a gold seal. The crowd leaned forward, phones raised high, recording every second. His deep voice carried over the silence. "On behalf of Enugu General Hospital and the National Health Board, I present this to you, Miss Iphioma, for your outstanding contribution to community health." He handed her the document, and as her trembling hands received it, the compound erupted in applause once more. Cameras flashed like stars all around her. Some guests shouted her name, others clapped until their palms stung, and children cheered loudly. Auntie Iphioma. The same compound where she had once felt invisible now lit up with her presence. She stood taller than she ever had in her life. Her simple dress no longer looked plain. It looked like the garment of a woman who had conquered silence, pain, and rejection. Her tears sparkled, but they were no longer heavy with sadness. They were tears of pride, of triumph. Neighbors who once ignored her now scrambled to capture her smile on their phones, as if they had always believed in her. Strangers who barely knew her name now shouted it like a chant, and her family, who once silenced her voice, could only watch as the world celebrated what they had overlooked. Iphioma looked up, clutching the document close to her chest. Her voice shook, but her words were clear, reaching every ear in the compound. "That day they tried to make me invisible, but the world saw me brighter than ever.